listening to Second Wind with Joyce Buford, where women who are ready to expand their life adventure discover the tools to stop playing small and tap into the courage required to enjoy their second wind. Welcome.
Welcome to Second Wind. I am delighted that you are here today. This is the reason that I created this podcast, so that people would come, such as you, and I could help inspire you to dream bigger, to live your life at the fullest that you can, and to know that you have many, many what I call second wind experiences ahead of you. Now, you know, my guests are always women that have experienced their second winds, and they share them. They share their knowledge. They share their journey with us so that we can benefit from their journey. So one of the things I'll always emphasize, the importance of connection and support. It's valuable in helping you manage your life. So I thank you again for being here today. And I want to get into the story of this lovely lady that's with us today. Now, her name is Erica C.U.N.I, and she is known as the Burnout Professor. She is an integrative psychotherapist, a professional speaker, trainer, social media creator, and fellow trauma survivor. Over the past 15 years in her psychotherapy career, Erica has worked in almost every level of care and with several systems, working with the Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Corrections, the public school system, and the juvenile justice system. So you know she's very knowledgeable. She's very prepared for her direction in her life. Her most notable positions have been a clinical director at a children's psychiatric outpatient program in Connecticut, an adjunct lecturer and clinical professor at Central Connecticut State University. While at the university, Erica taught human development with an attachment theory perspective and trauma-informed lens. Now, I don't know that, and I'm sure she'll explain what that is to us. Dysfunctional family process. Now, we all know these, but the substance use, domestic violence, sexual abuse, mental illness, and intergenerational family processes. We're familiar with those, and those are in our layman terms. Now, she is the founder of her program, C.U.N.I, C.U.N.I, and that stands for Create Undeniable Natural Impact. Now, her mission is to help the mental health field become more effective, accessible, decolonized, and non-stigmatizing. Erica found her mission in 2014 through her own personal story that she's going to share with us today. So welcome, Erica. This is indeed a treat to have you here.
Hi, Joyce. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here, and I'm delighted that you wanted me to be here. So thank you for having me.
Oh, yes, it's my pleasure, because I love to share the stories, and you have so much that can relate to so many people. I have friends, we all deal with the mental illness in some level. It's in our own level. We have our own mental illness to deal with. And so anyway, tell us about what happened in 2014 that sort of turned your path.
I sure can. And I hope everyone's got a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with you. Let's buckle in. In 2014, I was somebody who was dedicated to my job. I was stressed out, but I wouldn't have thought that life was any different. Like I thought everybody was stressed out, right? And I thought that's how you were supposed to live your life. I had a 45-minute commute to my job, and it was this is where I differ from some folks because of what my job was. I was in a lockdown facility with 24 men, helping them rehab back so that they can go back into the community because they had already been in jail. Okay. And so it was hard work, but I loved it at the time. I would call myself an adrenaline junkie. And so I loved the hard work that I had.
Yeah.
But that particular day I was driving to work, it was so sunny out. And I started to think, I can't dig into myself and get that energy that I need. I can't find that spark. And that coffee that I had with a couple of shots of espresso in it wasn't cutting it that morning either.
Yeah.
And so I was like, wonder if I could call in work and say that I got into a little fender bender. And wouldn't you know, a couple of moments later, a Mack dump truck, one of those big triaxle dump trucks, merged into my lane.
Gosh.
He never saw me and I had nowhere to go. And I hit that Mack dump truck and I was literally, when people say, oh, you got hit by a Mack dump truck, and I'm like, yes, literally, right? And I'm one of the few people alive to say, and I survived, right? I'm blessed to be here. Just quickly to wrap this portion up of it, of the starting point. I actually had to have emergency surgery that day, and I was in the hospital for a week, and then I had a 3-month recovery period of learning how to walk again. So
oh my gosh,
it was I am blessed to be here. It wasn't my time to go and I had a mission to be here. And I'm glad I was able to recognize that I had a mission. But as we continue this conversation, you're going to learn that that was just the beginning and a lot more happened over over the next 14 to 24 months.
Yeah. Yeah, some of those things happen. It's almost as though you call them in. Did you ever have that flashback? Did I do this to myself? We call this into us. So yeah, learn how to walk again. That's major. And lots of surgeries, I would assume.
No, I lucked out with that. It was only my foot. I really almost lost my foot, to tell you the truth. Like, I don't want to get into like the real nitty gritty, but it was it was very gruesome. And I had to learn they didn't think they were going to be able to save my foot. And so I had to fight to keep my foot. And then I had to keep my foot elevated up in the air because I couldn't, to help the swelling go down. And so I was somebody who was always go, go, go. Was a waitress for 18 years, right? So I have the mentality, you got time to lean, you got time to clean. So here I am sitting there and I'm like, I can't sit still. What am I doing here? Like, I need to be up and walking, and I couldn't. And that taught me a lot about how to sit still.
Well, that kind of makes me ask this question. What person in your family did you see that modeled through?
Everybody. I'm third generation Italian.
Yeah.
So we were always blue collar, always working. You make your money, always make your money. You're sick as a dog, you get up and you go. You figure out how to make it happen. Right. So it was just everywhere. That's just how I was brought up.
Right. Yeah. It's amazing what we bring with us that are really they can be really good blessings, but they can also be not so kind. And in today's life, I think you have to work it a little different because our environment is so stressful and it's so subtle. So how did you start creating the life that you wanted? After you got out of the hospital, you went into what?
So I went and sat on the couch for 3 months, and I would like to say that I learned my lesson about slowing down and to really take time to smell the roses, but I didn't. As soon as I could walk again, I went full steam ahead with my job again. And slowly but surely, though, my relationship that I was in a long-term committed relationship, and it started to deteriorate. But as anyone knows, it doesn't happen overnight. There were signs all along, but I chose to ignore them, or I had work that could distract me, right? And I wasn't paying attention, or I didn't want to face it either, right? Because when you get together with somebody, you love them, right? There's a reason. And then as it starts to fall apart, and that time, I didn't have the skills that I had now, I can say that much. And I didn't have the perspective that I do now, where there was stuff I would never have put up with now. Like now
Oh,
I would
yeah.
have nipped that in the butt, right?
Yeah.
And so that long-term relationship ended in the midst of this recovery period, right? And so because I couldn't function at that high level that I was before the Mack Dump Truck, and I don't
Yeah.
mean necessarily physically, I mean more mentally, because I was just drained with everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I found myself moving back home with my parents because I had a pit bull. I still have my pit bull. You might see him in the background. And I was like, oh, 2 weeks and I'll be out. Well, a couple of things happened. People don't like pit bulls. They don't like renting to owners with pit bulls. And then I realized I couldn't maintain the same energy level that I used to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was fired from my job.
Oh.
Yeah, that was the
Okay.
next wake up call. And the timing of that situation of me getting fired had came probably about 2 months after I had emailed my boss and highlighted all the progress that I made in my department because I was a supervisor.
Right.
And how I took them, like I increased productivity by 49%, in 9 months. Like I was rocking it. And he also had made the comment to me in one of our supervisions that I was extremely smart. I think quickly on my feet, but I come across as intimidating. So I should think about how I come across and I should adjust.
Oh, is that because you are a woman?
Yep.
Oh, got it. Oh, good. Now,
Yeah.
you said you couldn't do as you were. Why was that? Was that physically you couldn't produce at the same level that you were? Or is that the stress coming back into your life? Or what was it that was so different that meant going back into that job didn't work as well?
Part of it was the foot, right? I mean, it probably
Yeah.
took me a good year to get back to feeling like I could do anything. But I'm also that go-getter. So I was pushing myself to make sure that I can get back quickly as I did, functioning with my foot. But the stress piece was huge.
Yeah.
That was the part. And I didn't have the same wherewithal before the Mack Dump Truck. Before, I was the type of person, I was a crisis worker. So you want me in your crisis, right? I can take things from chaos and bring it to peace and smooth really quickly, and everybody would be happy, right? Or functioning in a way that they needed to. And afterwards, somebody would say, how you doing? I'd be like, I'm fine. Everything's good. They're like, you don't want to process? I'm like, no, I'm good. What are you talking about? Right.
Yeah.
But that's also what I learned in my family.
Yeah.
You don't tap into those emotions. You just keep going. You keep pushing through. You're fine. Perfectly fine. And you're smiling while you're saying it.
Yes. Right. And you kind of flip it off the end of your tongue, right? Oh, fine.
What you talking about?
So, okay. So you decide you have to change your life. You have to do some thinking. So how did you do that, Miss Therapist?
So here I am. I'm thinking, okay, here I am. I'm on my parents' floor. All right. It's the first night there. And I'm crying. I'm ugly crying. And I'm not ashamed to admit it at this point. I'm ugly crying. And I have my bottle of wine with me. And I have my red wine.
That helps.
And I'm like, how did I get here? I don't understand how I got here because I thought I was doing everything right. Like I followed everybody's rules. I went to college. I got my master's degree. I'm helping other people out. I help them figure their stuff out. Yeah. What am I missing here? Something's missing. And I even did therapy, traditional talk therapy, before going to grad school. Oh. So I was like, okay, so maybe I got to go back to therapy. So I went back to traditional talk therapy. And as I was walking in every week, I was realizing I was walking out more agitated.
So you were seeing a therapist. Is that what you were doing?
Yep. I saw a traditional talk therapist. I'm going to keep emphasizing this because there's different types of therapy, right?
Yes.
And the traditional talk therapist is you go in the office, you sit on the couch, you talk, and then they say, well, how about you go see a psychiatrist and we'll give you some medication too, right? And then they plop a label on you and then they say, okay, see you next week for your next hour, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was walking out of there each week. I was getting more irritated, more agitated. And in my mind, I was thinking, there's nothing this woman's going to tell me. And I shouldn't say woman because we were the same age at the time. So she wasn't older than me, but I was like, she's not going to tell me anything. I'm already a
Mhm.
supervisor. I supervise
Mhm.
other clinicians at
Mhm.
this point, right? So I'm like, okay. Then I did therapy right before grad school. So I'm like, there's no nook and cranny about my past that I haven't already looked at, right? So I'm
Right.
like,
Yeah.
nope, that's not it. So what the heck am I missing?
Right.
And so I was getting frustrated. And around this time, my mom, now mind you, like we don't sit still. We don't really talk about feelings. We love each other, right? But we
Right.
just don't do that. She was like, I'm going to go try a meditation class with my friend. Do you want to come?
Well, that was well, good for mom. Wasn't that unexpected?
I was like, I can't do that. That's not who I'm not one of those people. And
Yes. So what did you do? I mean, to change all this chaos that was heaping on top of yourself?
so around this time, my mom has actually suggested going to a meditation class. Now, remind you, right? I said earlier, we don't talk about our emotions. We push through everything. And so I was like, what? Meditation? And then in my mind, I'm like, I don't do that. That's not who I am. That's for those people. That's not for me.
Oh,
Right? Like,
that's
nope, sorry.
interesting. Yeah.
And she talked me into it like any good mother would.
Mm.
And I went and I sucked at it. It was a horrible experience. But what I can tell you is the community that was there in that meditation class, that softness, that gentleness, that nurture that I was so not exposed to in my day-to-day work life was there. And then
Mhm.
I said, you know what? I'm going to come back. I'm going to figure out how to do this. And so, because that's by nature who I am, right? If someone gives me a challenge, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to figure
Yeah.
out how to do it and I'm going to make it happen. And
Yes.
so that started my journey with spirituality
Yes.
and meditation.
Yes. Well, all right. Tell us about your program. You also, I want to define some things that we talk about burnout. That's a word we throw around. Some people that work in a stressful office, they have burnout, but and that's like your experience where you were overworked, overstressed, over it's all of those coming together that cause the condition of burnout. But I think burnout happens to moms. I mean, they're overstressed. They have all these jobs they're trying to successfully do. We all, even though we're not in the office, burnout can happen in just life, taking care of the family, overdoing. And of course, it's always got to be right, right?
Mhm.
Always. So there's that added stress. So you also mentioned in one of your talking points that chronic stress. What is that? Chronic stress.
So there's levels to stresses or to stress, I should say. And, the first phase of stress is that push through mentality that we were just talking about, where I'm
Yeah.
fine.
Oh,
And you keep
yeah.
doing what you
Right.
need to get done, right? And you're still
Right.
functioning.
Right.
And then there's a second level. And this one's where your behaviors start to change a little bit, where you notice that you might drink more coffee than normal. Like what I was doing, I was starting to add those shots of espresso in, like, come on, give me that
Oh,
brain juice, right?
yeah. Yeah.
And then there's also, you start to drink wine or alcohol at night to help you unwind, right? And you're
Mhm.
like, I'm going to have a glass of wine with dinner tonight. Right.
Mhm.
And I started to do that quite often as well. Like I started to have that red glass of wine to say, I just need something to just, because today was a hard day. Right.
Uh-huh.
Because at this time, it wasn't just my job, like how you were mentioning. I was in a relationship with somebody and there was traditional views there about who takes care of the household. Right. And there was also children involved. They were not my biological children, but they came to the house and stayed with us, right? And so it was a lot more than just my job, right? And there
Oh,
was stuff
yeah.
going on with my family in the background as well. And so at that second level of, right, you start doing social media scrolling more and more. Like you find yourself on YouTube or
Oh.
playing word games, right? And then before you know it, you're like 2 hours pass and you're like, where did my time go? I don't understand. And then that third level, there's 4 levels overall. The third level of stress is when you start to realize there's physical symptoms going on in your body, because chronic stress and burnout all happen in your body first, and your brain is the last. It's our psychological symptoms is the last thing that we typically start to notice. So for those physical symptoms, that can be tightness in your chest when you're doing things, bone aches, like all of a sudden your knees hurt more than normal. The pinched nerves in your neck, like you turn your head and all of a sudden you have a pinched nerve and you're like, yo, right? GI issues. So I'm Italian, I call it agita, but it's heartburn, acid reflux, migraines, and headaches. You get more of those, right? And that's all because all this stress is being stored in your body and it has nowhere to go. And if you let that continue, right? And then there's unexplained illnesses that can happen, right? You'll go to the doctor because you start not feeling well. And when you go to the doctor, what do they say? You probably have IBS, or we don't know what's wrong with you. But we're still going to give you a pill. Here you go.
Yes.
But we don't know what's wrong.
Yeah. Where does sleep come in? Sleeplessness? Is that in one of the stressors?
Oh,
or one of
yes.
the signals?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, like when you wake up in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. and all of a sudden you're like worried about everything that has happened 20 years ago, that's going to be happening. Or then you feel like you can solve all the world problems at 3 a.m. because you're wide awake, right? And then there's also components to struggling to go to bed, right? Like there's so much on your mind that you can't go to bed. So it's one of two categories, but yes, disrupted sleep is for sure. And then the eating, emotional eating, right? So you start to gain weight and you realize you can't lose weight, or you can't gain weight, right? There's something not okay with your body. And then if you aren't able to adjust your nervous system, so this is all ruled by our nervous system that's in our body. And if we don't know how to have a flexible nervous system, this is why our bodies start to get all these illnesses. And then if we don't address that nervous system, that's when we hit the burnout stage. And the burnout stage is now when you're not able to function. You are like a robot. There's no spontaneous thinking anymore. You're on automatic pilot. Or if you were like me, I slept a lot. I couldn't get myself up and move. And I was somebody who was always moving, right? So some people can call this depression, but I refrain from going there because it's more about the nervous system.
Yeah. Well, there's one other area that you mentioned that I really want to spend just a little bit of time on it because it's so impacted our civilization for 2 years. And it's the pandemic brain. You call it the brain, but I think the pandemic affected everything, our body. I know everybody put on weight. I mean, it really affected us in many, many ways. And so now we all have to recover from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So usually when I talk about the pandemic and pandemic brain, the pandemic brain is your nervous system, right? Because your nervous system's attached to your brain. And so if your nervous system is detecting stressful things happening, it sends signals up to your brain. And that signal starts to activate it's called the amygdala, but it's really your survival part of your brain, right? And it's what tells us that we're either safe or not. And when it's activated, it goes and sends signals all throughout our body and our brains and shuts down things. So what it shuts down is your rational thinking, your executive functioning, your language processing. So think about when there's a fire, right? And you're trying to figure out where to go, how to do everything. All the directions with the fire drill are simple, right? They're signs and simple. That's because when we're stressed out, we wouldn't be able to compute something that was complicated or complex.
Right.
So this is why over the last 2 years, it can feel like we're on Groundhog Day or 51st Dates where everything's repeating and we're not able to learn new things because our brains are stressed out. We have lower tolerance for patience, right? Everybody seems to be a little bit more crankier than normal, right?
They drive really aggressively.
Yeah, I've noticed that. I was like, I went out, I traveled, I moved during the pandemic, right? And I moved from
Let's add more stress, of course.
It was actually not stressful. It was the opposite. I tend to be the opposite of everybody. You know, everybody gained weight. I lost weight. Like
Oh, oh, okay.
yes, but I changed my eating habits. So I adjusted
That's
to the,
yeah.
but yes, I changed locations and I moved. And when I was driving to the new location, I was like, everybody was just like zooming. And I was like, why is everyone so stressed out? And I'm so used to being in my little bubble, like, okay, one day at a time, we're okay. Because I took what I learned from my own journey and I started
Yes.
applying it now. Right.
Right.
So
How did you select where you chose to move to?
my family.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, some people have small families. You have extended, I can tell.
So my parents had moved a couple of years prior. And so when the pandemic hit, you know, I was virtual for my business completely. And I also resigned from being a professor during this time. And so I was sitting here and I was like, I can stay up here, be isolated, or I can move and be near my family while nobody's really seeing anybody else. So why not? I can afford to do it. And my business allowed it. And I chose to find a way to make myself happier because I knew connection was going to be key.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So now I want to talk about your program that you created, because I went to your website, and your website is, what is your website?
It's actually a link tree. So I don't technically have a website anymore. It's Linktree / the Burnout Professor.
Yes. Okay. So is that with, well, it doesn't matter how it's set up, but that's how they get to you.
There's multiple ways because I have multiple hats that I wear.
Yes.
And I am part of a global mental health movement called #SameHere. And I have a profile up there so that you can read about me and my story in depth. And then that link tree is also things that I have up there that are linked to, like my book recommendations, the services that I offer, my own personal story again, and then some resources, free resources for folks to use.
I think that's what I saw on I went to your website. I think I went to the LinkedIn and I saw your program, what you have in your program.
Yes.
All the different, so tell us about that, because they're all wonderful things. I like them. Do I use all of them? No, but they're all good. So she knows what she's talking about here.
So with my program, C.U.N.I, Create Undeniable Natural Impact, it is all about your gut health, mindset health, relationship health, sleep health, spiritual health. It's everything. It's a holistic approach, or you can say it's an integrative approach, right? Yes. And when I say spiritual, it's about connection, right? And it's connection to a higher power if you believe that, but it's also connection to a belief or a faith that you have. It can be science. It can be anything, really. It can be connection to Mother Earth. It can be connection to yourself. So I always like to highlight that because connection's important on this journey. And I can't stress that enough. That and sunlight. You need connection and you need sunlight. And it's not, don't be afraid of the sun. Please don't be afraid of the sun. You need to get outside and get some vitamin D.
Yeah.
And,
but
while the other piece, yes.
Right?
Yes. The other piece to my story that we didn't really go into is I also have a incurable lung disease. And when I was 18, I had lung surgery to remove part of my lung. And so that's the backstory. When I had the accident, right, and sitting still for all that time, it caused some issues with my lungs. And so a lot of infection. And so it started to go where they were thinking I was going to have another surgery. And I was like, no, I'm like, no. I can't say that enough. No. And when I went to that meditation class, and then I joined that community over there, they started talking about gut health is mental health, right? Gut health helps you heal your body. And so I dove headfirst into all that knowledge. And I was like, I am going to learn everything I can about how to heal my body in the most natural way that I can. And I did. And so
Oh,
I gained success with that. And so once I did that personally, then I took my degree and I went and got certifications so that I could do this with other people. So it wasn't no more just the woo woo over here that, yes, gut health and all that. I went and got the integrative mental health certificate to help for mental health using food.
oh,
Because our
okay.
gut
Yes.
dictates what goes on in our brain.
Yes, I believe that. Yeah, I
Mhm.
do. But you have some just some of the techniques that you use. You have breathing exercises,
Yes.
meditation, which is where you started. So I would assume that there's no starting point. Anyone you'd say, well, that's number one, that's number two. She has numbered these, but I think that
Yeah, no, there is no starting point.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Because each person that walks into my quote unquote office and each human being that's walking this earth has a unique situation and a unique background. And everybody has different ways of leveraging their nervous system. And the movement and the future of mental health, the future of medicine, is to understand each person's unique situation and how to leverage that nervous system, whether it's through diet, movement, connection, mindset shifts, or exercise, right? It's all of those things. It's no longer go to the doctor and pop a pill. It's let's figure out how to regulate this nervous system in a way that is perfect for you.
Right. But aren't there some common denominators that we all need to incorporate into our daily lives?
We
Such as
need
the exercise and the food and the, right?
we all need movement.
Yeah,
We all need a diet
right,
that supports our body. So
right.
in generic terms, it's movement, your diet,
Uh-huh.
connection, and healthy mindset. Those are the generics
Mhm.
because each person's diet's going to look different because
Yeah.
there's food sensitivities and different heritages. So,
Yeah.
you know, one of the misconceptions I think in our diet culture is
Mhm.
you got one way to eat. You got to eat this food. You got to either be vegan or not vegan. And vegan isn't for everybody because we have to eat for our heritage. Where is your family lineage from? Right?
Oh, yes.
That
Yes.
makes, and that's because that's our makeup, our chemical makeup of our body.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's what, for years we've all, well, I will say I have dieted numerous times. And, it's whatever gets my attention or is promoted as the hottest new diet. And then we try it and it doesn't work,
Right.
or we can't stay on it because it doesn't feed us, doesn't give us what we need.
Yeah.
And so that's really important what you say. I mean, you take into account who I am,
Yes.
not that I'm a fat person and needs to go on a diet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. And I used to eat food for comfort. I mean, I was a cheese fries person, especially when I was like, give me those cheese fries. I'm hungry, right? Now I look at my food as my medicine.
Ah.
So I really start to think about, I'm more intentional with how I eat. And I think that's true all across the board with how I live my life now. It's about being more intentional than whereas before I was just on automatic pilot all the time. Like, yep, this is just how it's supposed to go. Okay, check, check, check.
I love that. Now, I know that you work with, tell me how you engage with your followers. And do you do it on one-on-one? Do you do it in a group? Because you do have a Facebook community.
I have
And tell
Facebook,
us.
I have Instagram, and I have LinkedIn. Currently, it's funny because they all fluctuate, right? But currently, Instagram seems to be my hotspot where I'm getting the most traction.
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing is that it's through my educational videos that I promote, right? That I make. And I do one-to-one coaching. I have a class and a course. And the class is called Stress Be Gone. And it's just basic skill sets that can help you, like 4 or 5 skills that can help you maybe start to mitigate some of the stress that you're feeling in your life. And then the course is called Burnout Recovery. And that's when the folks you're already past the point of stress. You're like, I'm somewhere else at this point. And it's community based. I am big with that because it's the same folks every week.
Yes.
And we meet and we build that tight community, and it's over 12 weeks.
Okay. So it's actually a program that you offer for both.
I call it a course because I originally created this because I thought I was going to teach this at the university. So I had that in my mind.
Yes. Yeah. But when you, on your course, not without giving all of it away, but there has to be a starting place. And is that starting place getting to know the inner person, or what?
So my starting place is actually the overview of everything, like explaining the different types. Like there's burnout, chronic stress, there's trauma, there's vicarious trauma, there's compassion fatigue. Like moms and caregivers typically experience more compassion fatigue than anything, right? And I look at the word burnout as this big umbrella, right? And with that accident in my own life, what I realized was I was burnt out. I was suffering from compassion fatigue. I experienced vicarious trauma, meaning I heard other people go through their trauma and I had to hear those stories all the time. And then in turn, it traumatized myself. And then I had moral injury.
Yeah, right.
So these are all different things that we talk about to start. And then the next class, we go in behind the scenes. I call it the BTS, right? Because that's what the new kids are saying. It's BTS. And that's when we get into the science piece of the nervous system, and I explain and educate more about the nervous system.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And when do you talk? Because I'm right with you. I'm an advocate. It's taken me a long time to get here, but I am an advocate of the gut and the brain being, they're connected. Even as far away as they seem in the body, they are connected. But the brain is connected to everything. I mean, it just makes the whole thing work. I'm amazed at how awesome that brain is, what it can do. They just opened here in Dallas. Dr. Amons, are you familiar with his work?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Well, they just opened an office here. And so I went over to his office last week to take some of his tests to see where my brain is.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I'm going to get the report in a week or so. So I'll call you up and let you know.
Yes, let me know.
But it is very important. Your brain is it's the major thing in your physical body. Its thought starts there, everything. So it's so wonderful that he's been able to create such a guide on the brain. But anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you. I'm sorry.
I love hearing about that because it's, I love hearing how it's spreading out more than ever before, and the importance of it, and our brain is the command center. Our body is the compass.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. So I was in looking at all the things that you include in your practice. I was amazed at some of the far-reaching things, kind of for a scientist like yourself. I'm going to call you a scientist to have all that therapy background and study and everything. You have information about chakras. Now, there was a day that you would poo-poo chakras, wasn't there? You would not talk about chakras. The energy
2014. Well, that was hush hush in 2014. I didn't go to a spiritual class. I went to meditation.
Yeah. And chakras are, for those that don't know what those are, you want to give us a quick definition?
So chakras are your energy points in your body. And there's 188, I believe. I think, don't quote me on that. I know there's a lot of them. But there's 7 major ones that we mostly talk about. And, there's a rule of thought or a theory or a belief. I believe it's more of a belief that if one of those chakras are unaligned, then physical symptoms start to manifest, right? And then everything is out of whack in your body. And part of this journey that I went on, I became a Reiki master. And
cool.
Because I experienced it firsthand. Everything I've learned and then I went and got certified was because I experienced it firsthand. And
Yeah.
as I was gaining traction with my healing and my recovery, I kept thinking, oh, I should do this. And that could have just been my overachiever at the very beginning, but little did I know, I created this huge toolbox that now I can use from a quote unquote scientific standpoint, but
Yes.
also a spiritual standpoint, because part of the journey too, I walked away from my therapy practice, the traditional talk therapy. I closed it.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm done. I was so disenchanted with traditional talk therapy. And I went and opened up a spiritual coaching business.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that involved the Reiki, and that involved the chakras, and that involved talking more openly about what was going on with your energy. And what I realized when I was on the spiritual coaching side, I didn't have the science. So I was like, we got to marry these two worlds together. And then that's really how the C.U.N.I program came out, was because I married both worlds.
Right. Well, tell them again, the listeners, how they can go to you. I want them to find, I particularly want them to go to the link tree, because that's where I found all my information. So you want to tell them your web?
There's a couple of ways to get to the link tree. You can type it right in the search bar on your web browser and write linktr.ee/the Burnout Professor. Or, to me, the simpler way, but this is my own personal opinion, you can go to my Instagram account or my LinkedIn account or my Facebook account, and you can click on the link and it'll bring you right to it. And the Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn are all at the Burnout Professor.
Okay. Okay. Well, we have just really touched on the tip of everything that you've done. There's so much. And one, you're just you're amazing in that you just keep wanting more and more and more, and you go after it. And it's that that ethics that your family had. That if you have a question, go get it, go find the answer. And so
I owe that to my mom. I really owe that one to my mom.
Well, mom got you to the meditation. Didn't she? Give mom the credit there.
Yes.
So that speaks well of her openness to to try new things. Is she still doing her meditation? Didn't take as much with her.
So we joke in our family, well, especially between her and I, like, she brought me to this point, right? And she held my hand to get me here, but then I took it and I am like running with it, and she's here. But my job, my role, and my legacy is to take this as far as I can go, because she raised me to do it that way, right? And good, bad, and different, it doesn't really even matter. This is who I am, and this is where I am. And I know that Mack Dump Truck showed me I'm meant to be here. There's some bigger purpose here. Don't get me wrong. There was a couple of years there where I wasn't I wasn't like this. There was a lot of healing and going into those dark shadows and figuring out why I was where I was, and then going through learning this new way of being, because it truly is, and that's why my tagline is, this isn't therapy. This is a new way of being from this point forward.
Now, I always like to ask a couple questions of my guests. So the first question is, are you willing? That is not the question. I have another question, two others. So what is the most important action needed that you found to need in facing the fear of all the transition that you went through?
You have to have a belief that things can be better than you could ever imagine in this one particular moment, that things can get better. You have to have that belief, whether you think you're going crazy or not, and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to get there. You just have to have that fundamental belief that things can get better, and it can be better than I could ever imagine in this possible moment.
So how were you able to, in those dark days, which we all have through transition, depression, sadness, all of that comes back and
Hopelessness.
just, yes, lots of pain. How do you pull that out of yourselves? Just in the belief? And, well, this would be, of course, for your spiritual belief, but it is the belief that, so I don't want to answer it. I want you to answer it.
So in the beginning, I was still learning that belief, that spiritual belief, right?
Yeah.
So I had Post-its everywhere. I had Post-its on my bedroom mirror, Post-its on my bathroom mirror, Post-its by my coffee maker, Post-its in my living room with simple sayings that I had to keep repeating over and over and over and over. And that was one of them, was things can be better than I could ever possibly imagine in this moment.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I had to remember I am lovable. I am good enough. I am worthy of the life I seek.
Yeah.
So it was repetition because I didn't believe it in the beginning. I don't want to say it was believe it. Fake it till you make it. I learned also on this journey to believe it, to receive it.
Oh, nice. Like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. We call those affirmations, and but they're, get away from the name tagging it a name and just know that they build. And this is so interesting to me because you had been very successful in your therapy work, working with all sorts of different genres. And it's so interesting that no matter when we get into those areas of fear and doubt, all this stuff pops up, even for the most educated and the most people you think would not be faced. We all in the darkness face those doubts and fears.
Yes, 100%. That's what ties us as humans.
Yes. So what was the final question? Oh, it sounds like I'm on a game show.
I felt for there for a minute.
I know. The final question is, what is your greatest success in where you are today as you look back?
Finding my self-love and my self-worth and sticking to it and knowing that I can disappoint others and still be okay. And I am okay with who I am.
Pretty powerful. There's so many women that live their entire life and never get to those answers. Never get to that power, inner power.
No.
So I'm thrilled that you came on the show today, that you shared all your wisdom, and that I've been a part of helping you get it out, and to those women that needed to hear the message today. Because
thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. You can come back anytime.
I'd be honored to.
Oh, well, I thank you so much, Erica. This has really been a good show, a good building show. And so I thank you for being here today. It's very
Thank you for having me.
Now, for my listeners out there, I always like to finish the show with a charge. And the charge today is to go to Erica's website. Look at what she can offer you, a guide to answering many of those questions that you may be working with. Maybe you'll join the program. Maybe you'll just check her out on Facebook or all of Instagram or all of the other sites that she's on. But when you do that, one of the things I always stress is the importance of connection and support. Somebody that knows this needs to hear this message, and you can be the one that leads them to it. So I encourage you, as I always do, I sort of repeat it, don't I? That I really think that if you share the show, they can give, that may be the best thing that your friend needs to hear that day. So be sure to share when you hear the show, and also to share the information that Erica's given us. It's some really great information. So again, have a great week. I look forward to having you here next week. Thank you for being here today. Bye.
Joyce Buford returns next week at the same time for another edition of Second Wind. Through the Joyce Buford Empowerment System, women are receiving the support they need through their transitions and are able to reclaim their true purpose with confidence. They receive the tools they need to map out new lives. You can find out more about her coaching services at joycebufordempowers.com.